Hello and welcome to Talking Shit About. Yeah! This is Elizabeth, and each month I bring on a guest to talk about something they love, something they hate, and hopefully by the end we've all learned something. This month we're going to be talking about pro wrestling, which is new to me, but I low-key love it. I hope you enjoy and learn some stuff, and let's go ahead and talk some shit.
I was like, what the fuck does that mean? I have friends that are firefighters and I know that they use soap.
And she was screaming at me over soup.
Fuck this, I am not ever talking to a Scientologist again. These people are all insane.
I'm putting my bricks in the dumpsters, motherfuckers. Do you see me, bitches? I'm throwing my bricks. And he's just like chucking bricks.
Hello and welcome to Talking Shit About. I'm here today with James from Wrestling with Entertainment, and we're here to talk about pro wrestling, which, disclaimer, up until about a few hours ago, I had never watched pro wrestling, but I was like, I gotta watch some of it before, like, coming onto this, or not coming, this is my show, before having this show. Sorry, it's been a long day. But I binge watched some, like, what did I watch? I watched like Rikishi and Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, and then just like the most recent thing that came out on Monday. So I like tried to get some of it in before this interview so that way I could have some context, because I'd watched Glow and I'd always been kind of interested, but never really watched it. So I wanted to make sure I did that. But this isn't about me. This is about James. James, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello, hello. I am James J from Wrestling with Entertainment, where it's always a great day for wrestling. We preview and review the latest shows from WWE, AEW, New Japan, everything in between every Saturday. And then we interview pro wrestlers every Tuesday and Wednesday, for almost actually a little over 3 years now. And we've been up and running, being a show for 5 years in January.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How long have you been watching pro wrestling?
All of my life,
Okay.
honestly. I don't remember a time where I didn't have the action figures, where I wasn't watching pro wrestling. It started with me watching with my grandfather. He was, the gateway for me watching everything that I watch now. And I honestly can't imagine my life without pro wrestling, if I'm being honest.
Have you ever been to like a live match?
Oh yeah, I've been to too many, honestly. Most recently I went to AEW Full Gear, about as of this recording a couple weeks ago. I've been to WrestleMania twice. I've been to the Big Four paid previews. Um, yeah, I've been to a lot of events.
That's awesome. So how would you describe pro wrestling to someone who's never watched it? I mean, everyone has like an idea, wrestling, but beyond that, how would you describe what it is?
Well, wrestling is basically a soap opera with a lot of violence. And like, imagine, your favorite soap opera. If people actually still watch them, I have no idea. I don't. But like, imagine your favorite soap opera and everything that is said and done in that episode, and then it takes the ending is they have a fight with a referee, and that's the best way I could really describe pro wrestling. It's essentially that's what the mega, company is doing, WWE. They've always said, we make movies here, pal. So it at the end of the day, it's all about entertainment.
That's cool. Yeah, I was watching it and I was like, wow, this is like it's theater. and I love that. It, it's so much more than, and like, but it's not just acting, but it's also got like that really athletic element to it. Um and
Right.
like some real like danger to it. Like I saw somebody's nose get busted. And I was like,
Oh yeah.
that definitely was not planned. So what
Sometimes
is
it
your
is,
what
depending
is your
on what
response?
show you're watching.
Oh yeah. What is your response to people who just kind of brush off pro wrestling as saying it's staged?
My response to that is that what's your favorite sport? Because it's probably staged as well. Pro wrestling is the only one that necessarily admits that it's a walk. It has been for like the 100 years it's been around. But I mean, I personally, all sports today are a walk. There's nothing that isn't fixed or predetermined. But if it came out tomorrow that, football was fake and that they know who's going to come in and win the game before it actually happens, they would lose their fucking minds. So it's easier for them just to say, oh, yeah, football, legitimate, 100%. We don't know who wins football games. Um, but yeah, I always felt pro wrestling was ahead of the curve because they were the first to admit it. They're the only ones to admit it, and all of the other sports are, they don't admit it. So I don't watch that fiction.
Yeah, so do you watch any other sports then?
I do not. Every 4 years I watch Olympic stuff, but
Yeah.
other than that, no.
Yeah. Same. This is kind of an anti-sport podcast, but slowly leaning towards pro wrestling. Um by slowly I mean quickly. But real quick, can we go over the acronyms for the different wrestling channels
Yeah,
slash things?
yeah.
Okay. Because I was like, I know WWE, and then you brought in another one, and then I was like, oh crap, okay. So, okay, so we have WWE, which stands for
World Wrestling Entertainment, the mecca of sports entertainment. Not gonna get bigger. Everybody, the three letters synonymous with pro wrestling of all time. We have AEW, which is All Elite Wrestling. They've been in they've been active for around 5 years. It's ran by a guy named Tony Khan, who owns the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yeah, I think that's right. And essentially, he started a wrestling company with independent pro wrestlers, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. And for the beginning, it went well. They hit like a really high point, maybe like 2 years ago, and now they kind of dropped to where even their fans are saying this is, getting a little ridiculous. I mean, there was at some points in the show, at some episodes of the show, ratings wise, Jim Cornette's podcast, who reviews AEW regularly, gets more views than the actual show. So yeah, they're in a weird position right now. We got New Japan Pro Wrestling. I would say that they're the second biggest pro wrestling company in the world, over AEW. And if you're looking for sports-based pro wrestling, they are the number one. If you're looking for story-based, it's WWE. If you're looking for sports-based, it's New Japan. The story revolves around, the sport. And, this guy lost this match maybe 5 years ago, but he's coming back and he's gonna wrestle him again. And he didn't forget what happened, and this time it's gonna be different. That's kind of basically the New Japan kind of method. if you ever watch anime, it's basically one large tournament arc. There is TNA TNA Total Nonstop Action, who will become Total Nonstop Action in January. There was TNA, then they changed it to Impact Wrestling because TNA has other connotations towards it. And now they're back to TNA next year. They were a front runner to be bigger, to try and fight WWE and become, the alternative. But a lot of issues kept them from being that, internal issues. But at that time, they had A plus quality pro wrestling and stories. So, a lot of that falls to the wayside because there's such a negative outlook on the company as a whole. You got NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, who was supposed to be on the CW channel. Their recent paid preview, they had one of their managers doing cocaine on the show, which then caused the CW to say, no, WWE said that they'll be on our channel, so we're going with them. So they're in a bad position, really, as well. And I mean, there's like 15 others, but those are like the main.
All right, this is Elizabeth popping in. Of course, after the interview, I had some more questions, like, how does the storyline work in WWE? Has professional wrestling followed one continuous storyline for 50 years? This is from the Reddit community Explain Like I'm 5, which is one of my favorites. This is from Banana Jesus. They say, short answer, yes. Long answer, WWE is basically the same construct as a soap opera, like Days of Our Lives or General Hospital, except the content is written and marketed to appeal to a very different demographic. Technically, the story is continuous since it has followed wrestlers wrestling each other and forming and breaking alliances over the course of history of the sport. But just like those soap operas, while the whole story is continuous, the characters constantly fluctuate, new talent coming into the sport and old talent retiring, or taking up a management role, or leaving the sport to return later. Also like soap operas, when they conveniently find a character who was thought to have drowned 3 seasons ago when the actor decided to pursue a movie career. One thing I was also curious about were all the different belts. Does everyone get a belt? Is there more than one belt? Does the belt get passed on from one champion to the other? The answer to that last question is yes. Think Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door and the wrestling thing where you get to keep the champion belt and whoever is the winner keeps the champion belt, because again, I'm not a sports person, I'm a video game person. So if you're like me, think Paper Mario. But there are different types of belts for different weight classes and divisions, so that's why you'll see multiple belts running around. And that's kind of the general basis of how that works. Let's get back to the interview. So what are your favorite aspects of the sport?
I'm the type of person that if the story isn't interesting, and this isn't just in pro wrestling, just in general, if the story isn't interesting, I'm probably not going to watch, or I'm not going to be interested. And it's always been the storytelling for me. The athleticism, the matches, yes, that's great. And the moves that they do, I can't do it. So, cheers to them for being able to be as athletic as they are. But you can be as that athletic, but if you don't tell a good story in the ring, it doesn't really mean a lot. My favorite matches and my favorite things in pro wrestling are the stories that are told. Whether that's the Undertaker Kane sibling rivalry back in 97, 98, which is arguably one of the greatest stories ever told in pro wrestling, or, Rock Austin, Rock Hogan. One of my favorite matches was is Shawn Michaels versus Randy Orton from Survivor Series 2007. The story was Shawn Michaels couldn't use the super kick. And the whole match was Shawn Michaels trying to find a way to beat Randy Orton without using his finisher. And what was the ending of that match? He goes for the super kick. He stops himself because he realized he can't hit it. And then Randy Orton gets the better of him, hits the RKO, wins the match. That's storytelling in its best way. And then more recently, obviously, everything going on with the bloodline, Roman Reigns, Jey Uso, Jimmy Uso. I never expected it to go as far as it did, but it's really good shit. And whenever Roman's on my TV screen, I'm watching, obviously.
So you interview pro wrestlers on your podcast.
Yes.
Do you find that there is like a particular type of personality that are pro wrestlers, or is it pretty diverse group of people?
It's very diverse. You meet some of the nicest people in the world. The ones that I haven't interviewed, some of the most assholeless. So nicest, meanest, we've had every diverse, every gender, we've interviewed a wide variety of different cultures, backgrounds, ethnics. And they're all very different. But the fact of the matter is, whether you're from China, which I just did an interview with a guy from China, or Finland or Singapore or wherever you are, the one thing that kind of brings us all together is pro wrestling. Like, I didn't necessarily expect myself, to connect with these people because, different cultures, different backgrounds, different things. But, pro wrestling brought us together. And I actually had fantastic chats with these guys and girls.
Oh, that's beautiful. Are there any people that you like really connected with? Any interviews that really have stood out to you that you've done?
Oh yeah, there's been a lot. Just the most recent interview I did with Bovi. He's from actually literally my backyard. But we were just talking about Impact Wrestling TNA and how we were both at Bound for Glory 2009. I didn't necessarily expect to go as in depth in that conversation about TNA and Bound for Glory, but that was a really cool moment. Another one that comes to mind, I don't know why, but I'm really proud of my interview with Lori from a while back ago. That was a good one. Another one would be Sal Renaro, one of the best stories we've ever had on the show. The guy was full of stories, and they were all awesome. I can't recommend that interview enough. Another one would be our watch along with Joel Bateman. Side note, we watched a match that essentially, at the time, almost destroyed Australian pro wrestling as a whole. And he was at that show. And he was explaining to us where Australian pro wrestling was at the time, where it was before then, where it was going, how that match put a wrench in everything, and how it is right now. The match itself was only a half hour. He explained all of the history of Australia in 2 hours. And I wasn't necessarily expecting that going into the interview, but I was really glad that, all of that information was said. because I felt like I was in a classroom, and it was just like an awe-inspiring moment to hear him, talk about pro wrestling because a lot of our guests, you know, they were fans before they actually became pro wrestlers, so they have, that that love for the sport like I do, and my co-host as well.
How about the fans? What is like the how would you describe the fan base of pro wrestling?
Ooh, that's a complicated question. You have the WWE loyalists, you have the WWE casuals. Um, Obviously, casual fans are just people that watch pro wrestling, don't necessarily go online about it. Wish I was that type of fan again. Not anymore for obvious reasons. Then you have the AEW purist, the AEW on anarchist. You have the deathmatch wrestling fans. You have the comedy wrestling fans. You have Japanese fans. The Spanish fans. And they're all uniquely different. So it is a very loaded question, but I mean, at the end of the day, they're all wrestling fans. As long as they buy a ticket and everybody and they enjoyed what they're watching, it's good. Except for the people that just complain online that don't even watch it anymore.
What are they complaining about?
They don't need a reason to complain, honestly.
Yeah.
And all do people on Twitter slash X need a reason to complain about anything?
Yeah, I was curious because I when I was watching it today, I started out kind of in the 80s, jumped to the 2000s, jumped to now. Um, and I was kind of curious. I was like, oh, I wonder if they're gonna kind of lose like the gimmicks and stuff, if it's just gonna like how the attitude or like vibe, for lack of a better term, is gonna change over time. And I was like pleasantly surprised that I mean, you know, styles have changed and the way we talk has changed and stuff, but like the essence seems to still be there. Like from
Yeah,
again, just briefly watching it for a couple hours, it seems like it's still got like the same spirit and energy and like fun aspects to it. A lot more ads, I noticed, but that's
yes,
capitalism. So,
yeah. A whole different podcast for that.
yeah.
Um, but yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, pro wrestling is about, a good guy, a bad guy, who wins. I think one of the best things about pro wrestling is sometimes the bad guys do actually win. It sucks, but it does keep you, you know, in, invested in the program. Like you said, pro wrestling has been, primarily the same vibe. I do feel like, back in the 90s, it's been about the characters and developing the characters rather than, the matches, which is, what was the wrestling boom at that time. But now there's more of a shift in pro wrestling where people feel, especially the wrestlers, that it's more about the moves and doing the high spots and the moves that gets like 5,000 views on Twitter and Instagram. It's great that you could be able to do that, but that's not what people are going to remember in a match. You remember the moment, not the move. I believe DJ Hyde said it the best. WrestleMania 24, Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair. What do you remember out of that match? You remember, I'm sorry, I love you, the super kick, and the pin. Could you tell me what was the first move in that match? not you personally, but you know, the moves are important, but it's not the most important part. It's how you do the move that's more important. And I think that gets lost on today's talent more so than, back in the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Are there any aspects of the sport or the culture surrounding it that you don't like or that you would like to change?
Um, like I said, focus more on the storytelling rather than the flippy moves. That is a big one. I think WWE is doing a really good job with what they're doing with pro wrestling right now. AEW needs some really, it needs to whip itself whip itself into shape because their wrestlers are not being safe. They are getting hurt, and at sometimes there's a chance that some of the crowd gets into some danger. Um, I don't know if you saw this recently, but Hangman Page drank the blood of Swerve Strickland as it was dripping out of his head.
Uh,
That is not safe. That
no.
is not. Forget pro wrestling. That is just not a good thing to do in general, let alone on a sports show. So sometimes things go a little too far, um, and just sometimes when you pull it back, it could actually make it go forward a lot faster. You know what I mean?
So who are your, because I don't know if there's like, well, I guess, is there a best wrestler of all time? And if not, who, or either way, who's your favorite wrestler of all time?
Everybody's going to have their favorites, and that's going to be a long debate amongst fans forever of who is the greatest of all time. It usually goes between, Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, John Cena, etc., etc. But my all-time favorite pro wrestler is Chris Jericho. I've always enjoyed his matches, his personality, his ability to evolve. Because there's been like 15 versions of him, and they've always been relevant. Personal, like current favorites, Tetsuya Naito has always been a favorite from New Japan Pro Wrestling. He speaks Japanese, but when he does a promo and they translate it, I'm always interested to hear what he says because he always has something to say, and it's always something you have to listen to. It's never something that's just throwaway. There's always a meaning behind what he says, and that's definitely something that always attracted him to me. And then you have Cody, Jey Uso, all those guys in WWE right now, but the two I just mentioned are probably at the top of the list.
So yeah, it sounds like storytelling is a huge aspect of it, which I don't know. I watched Glow, and so I kind of like knew that was an aspect, sort of, but it sounds like it, at least to you, it's a huge part of it, which is really cool.
Well, like I said, there's different types of pro wrestling for everybody. There's this, the main story. There's just the matches that are flippy. You have comedy matches, death matches, technical matches. Technical matches are more like you would see amateur wrestling. Those are really fun. You know, you've seen all of Glow, or just like the first season?
I don't think I've seen the latest season because they go to like Vegas or something, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
Well, in the second season, do you remember the episode where it was just supposed to be an episode of Glow, and they would just their characters. That's an episode of pro wrestling.
Did you like that show as like a pro wrestling fan?
I did. It was I felt like it was positive towards the wrestling business. There are some shows in media that don't necessarily have the best light on pro wrestling. But I feel like Low really, captured pro wrestling at a good in a good light in those first two seasons. It was definitely, what it is to be an independent pro wrestler at that time. And even, it bleeds into, what people are going through on the independents now as well. Didn't necessarily like season 3, but season 2 was probably the best season.
So do you have anywhere you advise people to start if they would like to join the world of pro wrestling? Someone like me, as of like 4 hours ago, never watched pro wrestling. Where should they start?
Well, for like you personally, I mean, there's no better trend than the present. So what's actually going on in pro wrestling right now? I would recommend AEW for somebody that's new, just because I'm not quite sure they know what they're doing right now, let alone for somebody tuning in to understand. But current WWE is pretty good right now. The Attitude Era is always a great place to start. So like 97 is a great place. Maybe King of the Ring 1997 would be a good place. Or maybe like January of 2002, because that was the start of the Ruthless Aggression era. Personally, I see that era through rose-colored glasses because that's where I kind of started. So I'm always going to have a positive outlook on that era of pro wrestling.
Well, if anyone would like to check out your show, how can they do that?
Yeah, we are on YouTube at Wrestling with Entertainment. If you type in our name, we should come up. You can find us on Castbox and Google Podcast, I believe. You can also follow us on X, Instagram, and Dread at Wrestling with E. Our link tree is also in the description of our social media, so you could find our YouTube or Castbox or whatever way you'd like to listen to podcasts through there as well. And you can follow me personally at JamesJ993.
Sweet. And I will link your link tree in the notes so that way people can find it super easy.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it and explaining pro wrestling.
Absolutely. I hope I explained it well enough.
Yeah, no, you did great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's a wrap for this month's episode of Talking Shit About. We'll be back next year, the first Friday in January, with our next episode. If you'd like to support the show, you can share it, give it a rating, download episodes as they come out, or send me an email to be a guest on the show or suggest a topic at killizabeth.pod@gmail.com. That's KILLIZABETH.POD@gmail.com. I'm also now on Instagram at killizabeth.pod. And without further ado, I'm going to stop recording. Bye.